You ever walk into a place you own, a place with your name on it, a place everyone calls perfect on paper, only to realize you don't recognize it at all? That was me, not so long ago. Standing under the flickering lights of my family's flagship department store in Chicago, dressed like just another old man, trying to remember when I stopped being a person and became a walking set of spreadsheets. I figured, you know what, if I just strolled through the aisles, no one would pay me any mind. Turns out, I was right. Nobody looked twice at the guy with the cap pulled low and the jacket that had seen better days. But what I found that night, let's just say it cracked my whole life wide open. See, I wasn't there for some secret shopper stunt or to flex my invisible power. I just had this feeling, call it old school gut instinct, that something in my so-called perfect empire was off. You know how you can tell when a storm's about to hit, even before the clouds roll in? That was me, pacing the marble floors, catching smiles from cashiers and nods from security. Everything looked just like the quarterly report said it should. Clean, efficient, everyone doing their job. But then I heard it, a muffled, broken sob coming from a janitor's closet down a forgotten hallway. Not the wail of a lost kid or a tantrum over a toy. No, this was a sound that comes from somewhere deeper, from someone who already learned the world can't always be trusted. I almost turned around, almost told myself, hey, Harrison, don't be paranoid. But I couldn't. I cracked open the closet door, and there she was, a little girl, maybe 9, blonde hair all tangled, sitting on an upside-down bucket with a half-eaten apple at her feet, arms wrapped around her knees. She didn't even flinch at first. She just kept crying, as quiet as she could. Broke my heart clean in half. Hey, you okay? I asked, softer than I knew I could speak. She startled, wiped her face with the back of her hand, tried to sit up straight. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm not supposed to be here. I have to be quiet. Or else, I sat down on the cold tile, joints creaking like old hinges. Or else what, kiddo? Her name was Chloe. Her mom worked there as a janitor, pulling a double because the sitter got sick and there was no money for anyone else. Chloe was supposed to hide and be a good girl until mom's shift ended. She wasn't crying because she was scared of being alone. She was crying because she'd heard Mr. Doyle, the store manager, screaming at her mom, telling her she was too slow, telling her people like them didn't deserve a second chance. You know what I mean? The kind of thing that makes you wonder what kind of world we're running here. Then she pulled out an old photo, her grandfather in uniform, a chest full of medals, a look that said he'd stared down worse than any retail manager. He was a general, she said, pride shining through the tears. Mom says he always fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves. I just sat there floored. I'd met General Vance once, at a fancy dinner years ago. Man had more backbone than a steel bridge. And here was his daughter, scrubbing my floors, getting chewed out by a 2-bit tyrant, while her little girl hid in a supply closet. That was the moment the whole shiny lie fell apart. Now, you want a twist? Here it comes. I left that store, flew back to New York, and called in a favor from the only guy I trusted with secrets, David, ex-Secret Service. We cooked up a whole new identity for me. Harry Gibson, down on his luck widower, desperate for night shift work. I had fake papers, a backstory, thrift store clothes, the works. Next day, I walked right back in through the employee entrance, the smell of old garbage and stale air hitting me in the face. And Frank Doyle? He barely looked at me before assigning me to custodial on the night shift. Minimum wage, no benefits, doc pay if I so much as breathed wrong. It was everything my company policy said should never happen, but there it was, right in front of me, hiding in plain sight. Eleanor Vance, Chloe's mom, showed me the ropes. She was tired, limping, hands raw from chemicals, but she never complained. Just did her work, eyes down, carrying herself with this quiet dignity that made you want to stand up straighter. The rest of the crew? Same story. Broken people, each in their own way, scared to speak, scared to even take a full 15 minutes on break because Doyle hovered, stopwatch in hand. The kind of place where you learn fast to be invisible. And Doyle, man, he was something else. He'd dock your pay for made-up reasons. Cut the cleaning fluid to the point we had to scrub each floor twice. Assign the worst jobs to whoever looked the most worn out. The whole operation ran on fear. I watched Eleanor struggle, saw her limp get worse, so I took over cleaning the bathrooms, told her to go rest. She looked at me like I was nuts, but I insisted. That tiny act of kindness cracked something in her. She started telling me her story, how she'd been a paralegal, how her husband, a firefighter, died in a training accident, how she lost everything after Chloe got sick and her job let her go. And through it all, Doyle kept piling it on. End of the shift, he found the tiniest smudge, probably made it himself, and humiliated Eleanor in front of everyone, told her she'd have to remop the whole main aisle, off the clock, before she could go home. I'd had enough. I'll help her, I said, my voice suddenly louder, sharper. You could feel the whole room freeze. You want to take it out? Of my check, fine. But I'm staying. Doyle flipped out. Fired us both on the spot. Figured that'd be the end of it. Except, you know what? Sometimes the mask comes off. I pulled out my card, simple. Black, my name and title clear as day. You're not firing anyone, Frank. But you are handing over your keys, and you're done here. The look on his face. Let's just say it was worth every mop stroke. An aching muscle. I called in auditors, fired Doyle, fired his boss for looking the other way, paid everyone double for their trouble. Then I made Eleanor the company's first director of employee welfare. Her job now, to walk in anywhere, anytime, listen to anyone, and report straight to me. Because real change doesn't come from a memo. It comes from someone who's lived it. 3 months later, the store was different. Bright, clean, full of people who actually smiled. Eleanor had an office with a round table and her father's photo on the wall. Chloe, no longer hiding in closets, ran in every afternoon to hug her mom. And me? I traded my cap and jacket for a suit again, but I carried something new, a sense that what I built was finally worthy of the name on the door. So, tell me, have you ever had a moment that cracked your world wide open? Was it fair? Was it justice? Would you have done the same? Drop a comment and let's talk about it. Hit like, subscribe, all that good stuff if you want more stories that dig a little deeper than the surface. Because sometimes, the real story isn't the one in the reports, it's the one hiding in the back, waiting to be seen. That you'd think that after a showdown like that, the whole place would transform overnight, like you snap your fingers, and suddenly all the scars and shadows just disappear. But life's never that simple, is it? Change, real change, doesn't just sweep through on a wave of fresh paint or a new title on the door. It seeps in slow, sometimes fighting every step, like roots pushing their way through concrete. Let me tell you, there were plenty of days I wondered if I'd bitten off more than I could chew. First week after Doyle was gone, the staff moved like folks, half expecting him to jump out from behind a coat rack, barking orders, threatening to dock their pay again. Even with the bonuses and the apologies, you could feel the hesitation in the air, like everyone was waiting for the other shoe to drop. George, the old guy with the tremor, kept asking the new supervisor. Yeah, we made him supervisor. If he was really allowed to take his full break. Eleanor had to remind Chloe it was okay to come in the front door, not sneak around the back. Fear takes time to unlearn. That's the hard truth. Meanwhile, I was busy rooting out all the other little fires that had started while nobody was watching. You ever try to turn around a ship that big? People love their routines, even the miserable ones. I held listening sessions, actual, honest-to-God meetings where anyone could say whatever they wanted. Some folks came in steaming mad, others couldn't look me in the eye, but one by one, the stories came out. Shortcuts taken, corners cut. Folks in HR too scared to approve overtime because they'd get an earful from regional. A single mother sleeping in her car between shifts because nobody'd fixed the overnight schedules. It was enough to make you sick. Now, here's where the twist comes in. About 2 months in, Eleanor brought me a rumor. Somebody was leaving anonymous notes in the new break room, complaining the new boss was just as bad as the last. At first, I'll admit, I bristled. You fixed the biggest, loudest problem, and suddenly you're the villain? But Eleanor, with that lawyer's brain of hers, just smiled and said, maybe it's a good thing. Means they trust the system enough to speak up. You know what? She was right. We traced the notes back to a young cashier, Maria, scared out of her wits that she'd be fired for speaking up. Instead, we sat down with her, heard her out, and realized, yeah, we'd missed something. Turns out, her supervisor was overscheduling her, ignoring her school hours, and she'd nearly flunked a semester because she was too scared to say no. That was the day it really hit me. The work wasn't about one bad apple, or even one heroic fix. It was about building a place where nobody had to hide. Not a kid in a closet. Not a mother in a uniform. Not a student behind a register. We set up an anonymous hotline. Hired a therapist to drop by once a week. Gave out real, usable childcare stipends. And every month, Eleanor would meet with me, share every complaint, every small victory, every tear, and every laugh. No more secrets. No more numbers without faces. Of course, not everybody loved it. Some old-timers from corporate grumbled about coddling employees, about how in the old days, nobody expected special treatment. I let them rant, then asked if they'd ever had to choose between a night shift and their kids' medicine. That usually shut them up. Sometimes, you gotta remind folks that what's fair for one isn't always fair for all. And the changes didn't just help the employees. You could feel it on the sales floor. Customers started noticing how the staff smiled a little easier, helped a little more. Profits didn't drop, they climbed. Turns out, when people aren't scared out of their minds, they do better work. Who knew? But I'll be honest, the most surprising change wasn't in the numbers or even in the store itself. It was in me. I found myself looking people in the eye again, remembering birthdays, showing up to Chloe's school play just because Eleanor slipped me a flyer, sitting down for lunch with George and listening to his stories about the old Chicago, back when he was a porter for the railroad. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was playing a part. I felt human. And then, just when things were smoothing out, life decided to throw one more curveball. One afternoon, I got a call from our LA store. A whistleblower. Mr. Gable. We've got our own Frank Doyle out here. Only this one's smarter. Hides the abuse behind perfect paperwork. My stomach sank. You'd think I'd be discouraged, but you know what? I just felt ready. Ready, because I had Eleanor beside me, and a staff who'd seen that change was possible. Ready, because Chloe could walk the halls of her mom's store, fearless. Ready because this time, I wasn't alone. So, that's where we are now, fighting the quiet battles, store by store, one story at a time. And maybe that's the real lesson. You can change the rules, you can fire the worst of the bunch, but the real revolution is when people start believing they deserve better, that their voice matters, that no one, no matter how rich, how old, how important, is above listening. Now, I'm curious, if you'd been in my shoes, would you have done the same? What would you have changed first? And have you ever worked someplace where speaking up felt impossible? Go ahead. Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. Maybe together, we'll keep this thing rolling. And hey, if you're still here, hit like or subscribe. I've got plenty more to share. And I'm willing to bet you do, too.